ॐ योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पातञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि. I prostrate with folded hands before Patanjali, who benefited mankind by delivering yoga for mind, grammar for speech, and by removing impurities of body through medicine. So, in the last class, we studied, we started with the discussion on the various hindrances that come on the way of our spiritual journey and how Ishvara Pranidhana, that special type of devotion to God, can help us to get rid of all the hindrances which come on the way of our spiritual journey. And in the 30th Sutra, we started studying the various hindrances which has been enunciated. What are they? The Vyadhi, Sthyana, Sanshaya, Pramada, Alasya, Avirati, Bhranti Darshana, Alabdham Bhumikatva, Anavasthitatva, Chitta Vikshepa cha Antaraya. So, what are they? The first is Vyadhi. We find that disease is a big hindrance in our spiritual journey. It has been aptly said, Sharira Madhyam Khalu Dharma Sadhanam. This body is not our goal. To just keep health, proper health, is not our goal. But the body is just like the rocket launcher to launch the soul. If the launcher is not strong enough, if there is some defect in the launcher itself, we cannot, as if, eject the soul out of this transmigratory existence. So that's the purpose. For the liberation, we need a strong body. Then only we can think of progressing in our spiritual journey. So that's why if we find this body is diseased, then it becomes a big hindrance in our spiritual journey. The next is dhyana, the restlessness, which comes from a sense of insecurity. In our life, we find that there are situations, sometimes we find that everything is progressing. Everything is happening as per my wish. The life appears to be quite at ease. Everything is going on very smoothly. And suddenly, all the hindrances of life are like a bird flying. A bird flying, thinking the open sky is in front of me, and it never notices a transparent glass pen. The hindrances of life are something like that. It is something unseen, we cannot see it. Suddenly it comes. And just like the bird, we just crash with the glass pen and collapse. And then we find that life is so insecure. The hindrances are so unforeseen. Something is not there to hold on as if. And that gives a sense of restlessness. So the disease, the restlessness, and then the sanshaya, the doubt comes. That is there really anything called the spirit, the essence of my being, or everything is just the physical world? Everything ends with this physical world. The spiritual dimension is most probably just a mere make-believe. And all those doubts we find assail us today or tomorrow in our spiritual journey. It comes to all of us. It's bound to come. Even in the Christian mysticism, it has been spoken of as the dark night of the soul. We go through all those phases. The sanshaya comes, the doubt comes. Pramada, lack of enthusiasm because of lack of proper understanding. If the goal is not clearly visible to you, how can you feel motivated to proceed on the journey which you have undertaken? The goal should be visible. Then only I can proceed in the journey with full enthusiasm. As the goal is not visible, that pramada comes. From that, there is lack of enthusiasm, which results in alasya, the next hindrance. I start my journey at the beginning, there was a bit enthusiasm, then I lose all my interest because I find nothing as if there is ahead of me, and the laziness comes, and I find very quickly I stop my practices. It's a very common thing. We find in our spiritual journey, so many have resolved to start the spiritual journey with full enthusiasm. They start, and in no time, when the initial enthusiasm has gone, the initial thrill has gone, the laziness, lethargy, that dawns in our life. We stop the practice. And then what? Then the next hindrance, avirati. We find that after all, that we all resort to the spiritual life to get detached from the sensate existence, sensate pleasures of the world as much as possible. That should be subdued, and more I should grow in my spirit. As it has been told very nicely by Tulsidas in one of his dohas, that we can never cross the river by keeping our two legs on two boats. It's not possible. If I have to worship the spirit, I cannot worship the flesh at the same time. These two can never go together. But I find in my spiritual journey that avirati, somehow the intermission, the interval in my sensate adventures doesn't stop. It continues. That's what is meant by avirati. And then Bhranti Darshana, that after reading the scriptures without any realization, suddenly I start feeling that I have understood everything. As Swami Vivekananda used to say, that most of us, by reading spiritual books, make the mistake that I am progressing spiritually. What happens is actually just some intellectual understanding has dawned in. The doubts are getting clarified intellectually, but it is yet to become a matter of realization. That spiritual truth is not a fact of realization, but I think that as if I have reached the spiritual goal. That is Bhranti Darshana. That you are deluded about your spiritual journey. And then even sometimes if you are clear about your spiritual goal, you don't get deluded just by your intellectual understanding to be an attainment. You know that attainment is something, intellectual understanding is something else, but then alabdham bhumikatva, you feel that you never reach the goal. And then anavasthitatva, that if somehow I reach the goal once, I don't know when again it will come back. For the first time, I realize a let go has ensued, a bliss has ensued. And I think, oh, I have achieved. From the next day onwards, whenever I sit for meditation, I'm going to have it. So many of us have found that how deluding it is. It comes and goes. We never know when again that bliss, that wonderful bliss we most probably have enjoyed in our meditation once in a while, it never comes back. So that is anavasthitatva. So all this results from the chitta vikshepa, and these are the hindrances. There are a few more hindrances which will be spoken of in the 31st sutra, the next sutra, another 4 hindrances. But first let us deal with this. In the last class we have dealt in detail that about the vyadhi, the disease, that what's the real cause of the disease? It's the klesha. The cause of our bondage is the klesha, that in turn, in the long run, again results in in all the disease. As we were telling, what are the kleshas? Avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. From the ignorance that ego comes into existence, I start limiting myself within my psychophysical existence. And now what happens? Anything which is pleasurable to this psychophysical existence, anything which is favorable for its existence, I get attached to it in the form of raga. If anything is not favorable for its existence, if anything is going to annihilate it, I am afraid of it. I hate it. So dvesha and abhinivesha comes from all the detrimental factors of my psychophysical existence. So raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. These are the outcomes of the ignorance, that is avidya and asmita. And throughout the life, these are the three things which is motivating us for all the activities which we are doing. Raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. In the last class, we have seen this raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, which are the basic cause of our existence. Raga is the cause for all the growth, the things which is favorable for my existence. I get drawn to it. For the food, I get drawn to it. It is good. It is good for my growth. And dvesha, abhinivesha, I have to protect myself. So for the protection, the dvesha, abhinivesha, whatever is harmful, I have to run away from it. So this growth and protection, these are the two basic factors of life, which is taken care of by raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. But very interesting, what's the paradox? The same raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, which though spiritually is blurring my vision from my spiritual realization, is actually enabling me to continue in my physical existence. You may say, I don't have anything to do with the spiritual growth. But the big paradox, the big problem is this raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, which at the beginning appears to be something required for my existence, in the long run proves to be detrimental for my existence. When I get obsessive about them. As in the last class, we were telling that all the raga, when you get obsessed by them, after some time, what happens? You forget the necessity. You start overdoing it. Anything within the limit is good. That's why one of the main dictums of Buddha is Madhya Pantha. Don't go for the extreme. If you starve, that you are going to die. If you are going to overindulge in food, that again is going to harm you. All the lifestyle diseases is because of that indulgence. But why that? From where that indulgence comes? Because today's necessity we forget, and it gets converted into obsession. So raga that way becomes converted into obsession, which results in all the lifestyle diseases because of our obsession for them. We get highly obsessive to all those, obsessive, compulsive, they become compulsive. We cannot live without them. We overdo, we start indulging. And then instead of nourishing, they start harming us. So that's the obsession with the raga. Even dvesha and abhinivesha can be obsessive. They are good, but why they are good? Yes, when I am in some danger, I have to go to in the protection mode. But they harm in a different way. This growth and protection cannot go on simultaneously. As in the last class we were discussing. That when I am in the growth mode, the protection mode is off. The moment the protection mode gets activated, the growth mode gets off. As we were speaking of that experiment of the microbes in the petri dish, when they are going towards the nutrient, they are moving towards the center. When they are running away from the toxin, they are moving out of the center. These two cannot happen together. Even in the human being, we find that after the meal, if I am scared of something and I have to run, it is at the cost of my digestion. Why? Digestion speaks of growth. But the moment I have to run, my adrenal alarm has been set in, and all the blood now has to rush to the periphery, to the limbs, because I have to run. And it is done at the cost of digestion. All the digestive tracts where the blood was going, that's all those blood vessels gets constricted. Because if the blood is now used for digestion, you cannot run. So you have to run now. So they all go to the periphery, to the limbs, and your digestion is impaired, your growth is impaired. Not only that, our secondary protection system, the immune system, that also gets impaired when I am stressed. Because as we were giving that example, when I am in an immediate danger, I have to run. I can take care of my infection later. So the immune system is compromised when I am stressed. So you will find all the disease, after all, has something to do with the restriction of the growth and restriction of the immune system. Nothing else, not a single disease can go beyond the purview of these two factors. Either in some way my stress has constricted the growth factor, or it has constricted the immune system. These are the two factors, nothing else. All our disease is because of the constriction of these two factors. Now, if it happens occasionally, when I am in danger, it's okay. I can just take care of the growth later. I can take care of the immune system later. For the time being, that stress was helpful for my survival. So that was okay. But now if the stress continues because of the present social scenario, our work culture, the present society, we are in such a society now, apart from the work, even if we just say the COVID-19 situation, it is so unpredictable because of social isolation, where we don't know when it is going to be over. That again is creating stress, which instead of being temporary is continuing, is just continuing. And when that happens, then that what happens, even when there is no factor for the stress, there is no reason for the stress now becomes obsessional. It becomes compulsive. You will find if you are habituated with the stress, then even when you take a leave and go for vacation, you find without any reason you are stressed out. Even when you are in holiday, you need a sleeping pill for sleeping because the stress has become now obsessional. And these are the two factors, this results in all the disease. So where the Ishvara Pranidhana helps, in the last class we were discussing that Ishvara, that concept we find, what is Klesha Karma Vipaka Ashay Aparamrishta. He's beyond that. He is a Purusha, but he is a unique Purusha. He is not like us. He is in no way gets affected by the kleshas, as he is never in ignorance. He is beyond that. So when I am in association with Ishvara, I am just trying to practice his presence in my life, as if he is sitting in my heart, as we spoke of the Ahangra Upasana. He is sitting in my heart. He is always with me. He is above all those kleshas, afflictions, and he is the guiding factor of my life. Just by being aware of the presence of a Purusha who is beyond the afflictions, those values starts getting internalized in you. Those values gets internalized. And it's a very common thing. The thing on which you dwell, that creates an impression on your mind and that becomes your nature. Even we find the children, those who have started watching movie, some of the movie stars, they affect them so much. As they start dwelling in them, they start dressing like them, they start combing their hairs like them, the hairstyle, their dress, everything just is as if like the star whom they watch all the time. That's what is the nature of the mind. It gets tainted by the thing on which you dwell. So when your Ishvara Pranidhana, you get habituated that to be beyond the afflictions, that becomes now your habitual mode. You also start getting habituated, because that Ishwaratva, you can never become Ishwar, you can never become God, but the potentiality to become God-like is in us. All those godly qualities we can inculcate. And by constantly dwelling in the presence of the divine, we find in our life that the afflictions are getting attenuated. And immediately we find it has to do with our health. Immediately the health starts improving. Even if you go to the doctor, the same thing he will say: get rid of the stress, get rid of the obsession, nothing else. At present, we will find that if you have to prevent any disease, if you don't, you need not have to cure. First, try to prevent. The cure comes only when you are diseased. I need not have to go, I did not have to get diseased. There's the question of cure doesn't come if you have to prevent. And these are the two factors. Don't indulge, don't be stressed. And that, in that, Ishwara Pranidhana plays a great role. It's very easy to say don't indulge and don't get stressed, but how to practice Ishwara Pranidhana is a proven practice for ages. It's not that human beings are not that full that they will do something without any purpose, without, if it doesn't serve any purpose, why should he do it? For ages together, somehow we find that devotion, somehow devotion to the spirit, some spiritual being, to God, is something without which the human society cannot stay. You may take away from the academic education, the science may be there to say that they are all nonsense, but it still continues. Because it is a proven factor that necessity is a basic, religion is a basic necessity of human beings. Just the way we cannot stay without water, we cannot stay without food, we cannot stay without air, they are the basic necessities. Similarly, this religion, which has this idea of constantly being aware of the presence of the divine, it has to do with that idea that somehow has been with the humankind for ages together, because it's a necessity. It really helps us to cope up with the challenges of life. And the first thing we find is our health is improving. The hindrance in the form of vyadhi is falling off. And the sthana, the restlessness, the moment you get what you say, that hinged to the divine is always with you. This idea becomes something which is always in the background of your mind, this idea. You have got habituated to it. Then what happens, as the example we are giving, there is no effort as such. That you will find that all the so-called the fear factors, the sense of lack of security, they are falling off. And the example which we gave in the last class, if you remember, is just like a small child the infant or the small child was sleeping, and most probably because of some nightmare, it got up. It was highly agitated, starts crying. The mother comes and sits beside the child for some time, and the child again falls asleep. So that is the best way to understand that how, without any effort, just by that subjective feeling that someone is there to take care of me, can help us to go beyond the sense of insecurity, beyond the sense of loneliness. And that helps us to get rid of the restlessness which results from the sense of insecurity. And Samshaya, once you find that the restlessness has gone, you are enjoying health. Your practice of Ishwara Pranidhana has already started yielding result. Though in a very worldly way, that you are free from the disease, your mind is much calm. You are yet to attain any spiritual realization. But these basic things gives you the conviction that I am moving in the correct path. That this is helping me. And then the Samshaya, all the doubt starts falling off. And if at the very beginning I have started getting the benefits then of course something higher is waiting for me. And that gives me the enthusiasm to practice. There's a nice story of Ramakrishna. One day, one thief entered into the uh, orchard of a very rich man, and he was stealing all these vegetables, the fruits. And suddenly, the security heard the noise, some noise they heard, and they immediately they had there's inferred that someone must have entered into the garden. So there was a huge shout that, hey, most probably someone has entered into the garden. All the securities, they started blowing the whistle and they started searching. And now this man who was inside the garden stealing, now he was scared how to save himself. So what he did immediately, he saw some ash, someone has actually in the winter uh, placed some fire on some wood. They have gathered some wood and have lighted it to get the warmth of it. So some ash was there. So he smeared him, he opened up his shirt, just was wearing the lion cloth, and smeared himself with ash and sat in a meditative posture on the shade of a tree. So all the security who were in search of the thief found no thief. They saw a holy man sitting on the shade of the tree, and immediately the news was spread throughout the village that a holy man has came and is sitting just on the shade of the tree, meditating there. So all came to offer their respect to the obeisance, and they brought a lot of offerings in the form of food, in the form of money. And now this thief started thinking, I just took the garb of a holy man. I'm not a holy man. I've just taken the garb of a holy person. I'm just pretending to be a holy person. And just see how much I have already gained. If I really become a holy man, how much I'm going to gain? And the real renunciation dawned in, and the thief got transformed. He stopped stealing and he started leading a holy life. So this is a story, one of the parables of Ramakrishna. So here also the Sangshaya, the doubt goes off that way. When you find just by a little practice, you have got to a certain extent established in the presence, in the awareness of the presence of the divine in your life. The Vyadhi is vanishing, Sthana is vanishing, you're becoming calm, you're getting better health. The Sangshaya, the doubt vanishes. If just at the beginning I get so much, so many things must be waiting for me. So that Sangshaya goes, and then the Pramada, the lack of enthusiasm vanishes, lethargy goes, and then comes that Avirati. We have stopped here in the Alasya, that Avirati. So what is Avirati? So once you get the enthusiasm, you start practicing. You find the nature of the mind is such, what you do repeatedly. Once it becomes the habit, once it becomes habitual, that repeated practice of the same thing creates as if a path in the mind. In the modern neurological language, it is called the neuroplasticity. What you do again and again, just when you're skiing on the surface of the ice, skiing on the snow, and you will find that when you're skiing, a path is formed. It keeps a mark, a trace behind. Similarly, whatever is your pursuit in the mind, in the same way, a path is formed. And once the path is formed, you will find that the thing which you are doing out of necessity, now it has become something of your liking. As we were telling, that all the things, that how raga became obsessive, that's the way. Here, that same thing is used in a positive way. Here also the obsession happens. Now the obsession is for Ishvara Pranidhana. So just to think of God now becomes something of your liking. Previously, it was as if you were just struggling. You were using your willpower to keep your mind in the thought of the divine. Now you find it has become habitual, not only habitual, a bliss ensues of it. And as more and more you get bliss out of it, the other thing starts falling off. The other desire starts falling off. So, avirati, till you get bliss in the spiritual journey, it is impossible to get rid of our past old obsessions. It is impossible. We can never force them out. The only way, we have to develop taste for something sublime, something spiritual. In the words of Ramakrishna, the more we go towards the east, the west automatically falls behind. I cannot push the west out. The only way I can get rid of the west, I have to proceed towards the east. The more you become aware of the divine in your life, the more this other worldly engagements, they starts falling off naturally. As Sri Ramakrishna's examples are wonderful. You cannot force them out. You know, when uh, you develop some scab on the wound, when it is healing, the scab is there on the wound. If you just try to remove it, the wound will lacerate. You just have to leave it. It falls off by itself. And sometimes the ointment, if so, you can use some ointment and it accelerates the process of healing. So Ishvara Pranidhana is like that ointment. If you try to just simply scratch it out, the wound will lacerate. It won't heal. But you have to apply the ointment of Ishvara Pranidhana and it will automatically fall off. And the falling off will be accelerated because of the applying of the ointment in the form of Ishvara Pranidhana. So that's how the avirati, the interruption comes. And once it comes, you have realized what real bliss is. All your wrong notions about the spiritual realization is bound to fall off. You may develop so many wrong notions about the taste of mango by hearing about the taste of the mango, but you are yet to taste it. Someone have told that it is sweet, it has a nice flavor, and immediately you conceptualize and you start thinking, oh, I know. The day you taste the mango, immediately all those wrong notions are bound to fall off in a flash. The same thing happens here, that once the alasya, the lethargy is gone, you're enthusiastic about your spiritual journey that has taken you to that neuroplasticity where your practice has now entailed in bliss, in remembrance, and that also is spontaneous. And that has led to a type of realization which has enabled you to get rid of the bhranti, all the misconceptions. And now what happens as you continue with your spiritual journey, as you continue? At the beginning, for the time being, for for a moment, I may, in my meditation, I may go to the bliss, but I find again I go back to my old ways of life. But if I if I continue with my practice, and that also happens spontaneously as I have started developing bliss out of it, what you will find that more intensified is your bliss, the more falling off into the old ways becomes reduced, and to continue in your high sublime state becomes prolonged, and a time comes when you no more fall off, when you no more slide back to your old ways of living. And that is being indicated by the term anavasthitattvani. That sometimes we cannot remain, but if with the Ishvara Pranidhana I persevere, I continue, and then what happens? I become more and more established in that state, and it never allows me to fall off again. As in the last class, we were giving the example of an ordinary housefly and a bee. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that when we have just got a little bliss in our spiritual life, we will find that though we have the bliss of the spiritual intoxication, involvement, spiritual involvement, absorption, we fall back. Just like an ordinary housefly, sometimes we are sitting on the filth, sometimes on honey. But the more you grow, at last what happens? You like becomes like a bee. It sits always on the honey, no more sits on the filth. So that's the transformation. It happens with the Ishvara Pranidhana, which we spoke of, which we were discussing in the last class, previous class. Now we will go to the 31st sutra to continue with the discussion on this topic, where still 4 more hindrances has been spoken of. So to refer to the 31st sutra, now I will share the screen with you. So here we just now discussed all those things: the sthana, sanshaya, pramada, alasya, avirati, bhranti darshana, alabdha bhumikatva and anavastitva we discussed just now. I'm not going because in the last class also we have gone through the text. Now we will go to the 31st sutra. That still 4 more hindrances will be spoken of, which can be obliterated with the help of Ishvara Pranidhana. The more we resort to Ishvara Pranidhana, the more we become aware of the presence of the divinity in our life, this other 4 hindrances also falls off. What are they? Dukkha, Daurmanasya, Angamejayatva, Swasa, Praswasa, Vikshepa, Sahabhuva. If your mind is distressed, then along with the hindrances which has been spoken of in the 30th sutra, this other 4 also accompany. What are the? Dukkha, grief. Dukkha is the grief. Daurmanasya is the mental distress. We will try to differentiate when we discuss that. It may appear as if same, the grief and the mental, that when we are grieved, we are of course mentally distressed. So what's the difference? There's a subtle difference between it. We will try to understand with the help of the modern psychology that what's the difference between grief, dukkha, and mental distress, daurmanasya. And from this true, what other hindrances result? The tremor of the body. You will find that yes, in meditation it happens. Those at the beginning, those who are trying to meditate forcefully, they stress themselves so much, their nerves get stressed so much, they develop a tremor in their body because of the stressed nerves. So that is anga mejayatva. And irregular breathing. Breathing has something to do with the calmness of the mind. You will find that when your mind is calm, your breathing has become very regular, very deep and regular. And when you are very restless, the breathing becomes very shallow. You won't be breathing deeply, and it is very irregular. When suddenly your breathing may go fast, again it may go slow. There is no, as such, a proper rhythm in the breathing. But when your mind is calm, automatically the breathing becomes very rhythmic, regular, deep. So irregular breathing is something which follows grief and mental distress. So now let us try to understand that what is grief and what is mental distress. These 2. And how Ishvara Pranidhana helps us to get rid of dukkha, grief in life, mental distress in life. Now, dukkha, if we try to find out the cause of dukkha, our scripture says there are 3 factors for dukkha. What are they? Adhyatmik, Adhi Bhautik, and Adhi Daivik. These are 3 factors. Adhyatmik. There are some factors for dukkha which is within me. Nothing else, no extraneous factors are responsible. Just because, as we were mentioning, because of my improper lifestyle, I develop all the lifestyle diseases for which I can blame none. So all those factors which results in lifestyle diseases can be spoken of as adhyatmic. Because of very fast life, you may develop this mental distress, that is also to a certain extent adhyatmic. Adi bhautik, because of some other creatures, bhuta means other creatures. Adi bhautik means what? In the olden days, in the that when we were staying in the forest, in the jungle, or even much later when we were in the villages, the animals attacking from the forest, they come out and they attack the villages. It was a very common thing. Now you may say that we need not have to fear from the bhutas, other creatures. But the big paradox is, with all our development, we need not be afraid of tigers and lions, but we have to be afraid of the very basic fact, very preliminary creature from where life started. The virus, the bacteria, they are all adibhotik. Your present pandemic is adibhotik. It is because of the virus which neither can be seen, means you cannot even see it, perceive it. And that has created such a huge distress throughout the world. It is a pandemic situation. That is adibhotik. Adi daivik. Yes, because the nature, daiva means the nature. Sometimes the tsunami, earthquake, all those things, this can be the cause of the distress. So these are the three causes of distress in our life, dukkha. Now, whatever may be the cause, they all result in something called inescapable trauma. We'll understand that in life there are some small difficulty. You have a headache, you take paracetamol, it's gone. So that's okay. I am not afraid of it. I know that a small infection or something, there are medicine, there are so many prescriptions are there with which I can get rid of. But this present situation, you find that till the vaccination is found, there's an inescapable trauma. Not only with the present situation in life, even in your, in your profession. Sometimes we find that the situation is such, how the situations have developed, the complex situation, the complexities has developed in such a way, I find that it is almost beyond my powers to get rid of all the complexities in my life. And that gives me a sense of inescapable trauma. The problems are there which I cannot resolve. There is a huge wall in front of me. I cannot go beyond. And from such inescapable trauma, what happens? We develop a type of learned helplessness. It's a very technical term which is used in the modern psychology, that in life you will find that once or twice you have gone through the inescapable trauma, you develop a defeatist attitude because of this learned helplessness. Though the next situation, yes, previously one situation was there where I didn't have the means to really deal with it. But that doesn't mean that all the situations, all the challenges in life will be like that. There may be some solutions, but I develop a learned helplessness. I develop that idea, oh, I cannot, I am helpless. Most probably I cannot. Like in the previous situation, in this situation also, I cannot cope up with it. So that is the learned helplessness. When that you experience repeatedly is inescapable trauma, you develop this learned helplessness, which again results in the defeatist attitude. All sorts of this depression, you can find here, that we leave all hope. It results in very deep depression. And that depression, to a certain extent, can be explained as the mental distress. That all the dukkha at last leads to, if we cannot cope up with it, leads to this mental distress, the dourmanasya. In the modern technical psychological term, it can be termed as the depression. The tremendous depression is the dourmanasya. So how? Now they are saying that Ishvara Pranidhana can help. How Ishvara Pranidhana can help us to deal with the miseries of life, the traumas of life, and the depression that ensues from it. How Ishvara Pranidhana can help. Even in modern psychology, it has been accepted, the fact that they say that we deal with statistics. Now, God is beyond our purview. Whether God is or not, we are not bothered about it. It is beyond our purview. But one thing, something which is in our statistics is, in our studies we have found that those who are oriented with some faith deals with the life in a much better way. They cope up with the stress, they cope up with the challenges of life in a more resilient way. Now, this study has resulted in finding out the factors that what enables a few to deal with the challenges of life in a much better way than the majority. The majority goes to a pessimistic mode. A few, in spite of all the stress they go through life, in spite of all the trauma they go through life, they somehow maintain that optimistic attitude. So what are the factors that determines, that differentiates these two? So there are many factors. The first is, as we have in this chart we have made, the pessimist, they think all the situations of all the challenges of life are something permanent. I cannot deal with it. Once or twice they have went through that trauma and now it has become permanent. All the problems of life are something, my fate is such, I cannot deal with them. They again come, they always, they repeatedly come to my life, and most probably I cannot deal with them. So they are permanent. The optimistic, every challenge they take as a new one. The previous challenge is gone. That was temporary. I, again, with a new zeal, with enthusiasm, to deal with the new challenges. That makes them optimistic. The pessimists think the problem to be all pervasive. But a small thing, a problem has happened in the life, and they give so much importance to it that even the positive factors of the life, they get shadowed. To give an example, a small child is weak in maths, but is good in all other subjects. But when all starts pointing that you are weak in math, and that goes to his head, he becomes so worried about his weakness in math that it starts affecting his other subjects. The other subject is quite good. If there are 100 faculties, 98 are positive, only 2 are negative. Then why I deal with those 2 negative and forget about those 98 positive? So that's but the pessimist does that. He is so much bothered about those 2 negative and he forgets about all the positive factors. And that's how his problem starts pervading his entire life. The optimist knows to keep it local. Yes, I have some negativities. Everyone has. Yes, but that is just a part of me. Why should I allow it to influence my, just shadow my entire life? I am quite good at so many things. So that's how the optimists keep their problem as something local. The pessimist always thinks helpless. There's no way out. But the optimist, they're always hopeful. They know that somewhere or other, the good situations will come. The help will come. They're always optimistic about it. The pessimist plays blame game. For the situation, starts blaming others. But the optimist takes the responsibility. Now, what actually it means, we will further enunciate it. It is a very interesting discussion. First, let us try to understand that how that optimism can be developed by Ishvara Pranidhana. That example in the previous classes we gave, again, we will just resort to that same example, that all problems cannot be solved from the sensate dimension of our existence. We must relate to the spiritual dimension of our existence for answer. And now, to understand this, that example which we have cited so many times, that can you draw exactly 4 triangles by joining 4 points? You try, you can never do it. In a paper, you just spot 4 points and try to draw exactly 4 triangles. It will never happen. The lines will intersect to create the 5th or the 6th point. You will never get exactly 4 triangles. The answer is draw 3 points, spot 3 points in the paper and imagine the fourth point to be in the space. Now join the 3 points in the paper, you get one triangle. And from each of the points, now imagine a line on the point in the space. You will get a triangular pyramid with exactly 4 triangular faces. The base is one triangle, and 3 sides are also triangle. Exactly 4 triangle we will get. So the answer was on the another plane. Thus, you have to take the third dimension into consideration to get the answer. Similarly, in life, as long as everything is going on well, we find the sensed dimension of existence is quite fulfilling. Only the problem starts when we really go through those inescapable trauma. And then we find there is no answer. And that leads to terrible depression, which again, we will find that this drug addiction is related to this depression. When we find no solution, they resort to drugs. It has become a rampant problem in our life. This inescapable trauma, depression, drug addiction. So instead of drug addiction, which takes us spirally downwards, kills us, disintegrates us, we could have thought of another addiction, which could have taken us spirally upwards and would have given us the answer. That is the addiction for bringing the awareness of the divine in our life. That will be that is something relating to another dimension of existence, where you will find the questions of your life is getting answered. When you start relating to that, the divine dimension, there's so many things. Your perspective gets broadened. You are no more narrowed down by the sensate existence. The God is who is beyond all kleshas. He is there through eternity. I, also as a Purusha, can be like him by manifesting all the divine qualities which are potentially hidden in me. The more I think of him, the more I become like him. And then what happens? All the kleshas starts falling off. All the traumas of life, they become something temporary. It has to do with a particular phase of my life. My life is not restricted just to this present physical dimension of my existence. I am in eternity. Everything will pass off. Nothing is going to adhere to me through eternity. Why to give so much importance? In this relation, I remember one of the wonderful incidents in the life of Swami Vivekananda. When Swami Vivekananda was in the West, he was quite famous by then, lecturing throughout the length and breadth of America. Then another person, he was an agnostic, very famous. He was also delivering lectures throughout the country, and he was also quite famous. His name was Ingersoll. Now, Ingersoll and Swami Vivekananda met once. And the conversation is wonderful. Ingersoll is agnostic, doesn't believe in God. He says, I have this only one life. So I believe that I have an orange in hand. I have to squeeze it till the last drop. That's my aim in life, to squeeze out the maximum pleasure that I can get out of this one life which I have. That is to squeeze out the last drop of the orange. Swami Vivekananda replied wonderfully. He told, my aim is also the same. But the problem is, you want to squeeze till the last drop. But you cannot. You are in a hurry. For you, there is only one life. I leisurely go on squeezing. I know I live in eternity. You live in time. I live in eternity. That's a wonderful way to understand Ishvara Pranidhana. And nothing, there is no hurry. Nothing is there which is going to adhere to me as a permanent problem in life, however great it may be. It is something just temporary. It is something local. It is something which is affecting only a part of my existence. I need not give it so much importance thinking that it has just engulfed me. There is no sense of helplessness. I know that there is Ishvara to take care of me in proper time. You know, there's a wonderful book It is one of the classics in psychology. It's available. You can download free. That book is available even in your internet. You can just search. You will get it. Man's Search for Meaning. The name of the book is written by Viktor E. Frankl. Man's Search for Meaning. In that book, he is relating his wonderful experience as an inmate of the concentration camp during the World War II. The Nazis concentration camp, where you cannot just even imagine what hardship, what torture they were going through. In short, what I want to say is there, in that book, he told, it is not your physical health, it is not your strength, which really speaks of your sustainability when you are in a very stressed situation. What really factors for your sustainability, which can keep you going, is your hope. That there must be a way out. It is not going to be something permanent. There's something is waiting there to help us out from the situation. It is those who could keep that hope. It is not the healthy ones, not the physically strong ones. It is those who somehow could keep that hope enlightened, that was kept lighted by them. It is they, when they came out, they were skin and bones, but their wit was intact. They didn't get mad. The most of them perished, died in that type of torture. And those who came out, 90% of them were just stark mad, totally got mad. They couldn't keep their wits normal. It was only those who had that hope, who had that sense that we are going to come out of this situation. The help is there waiting for us. They could still have maintained their sanity. And that's what the optimistic is, the one who thinks that hope is there always. They never feel helpless. And the Ishvara Pranidhana helps that way, that there is a figure bigger than life. There's an entity bigger than life who can help me out of all the situations. Let me have the patience and wait. Never plays the blame game that God has kept me in such a situation for no reason. I don't know why. He takes the responsibility. That the idea is God has kept me in this situation for some reason. I seek not, avoid not. I don't go on seeking for better situation, nor I avoid it. I just take the responsibility of the situation. What does responsibility means? I will just, with an example, you will understand. In a monastery, one monk was quarreling extremely. By nature, he was quarreling. Always used to quarrel with others. And one day he quarreled with all, and at last blamed all and just told them that it is impossible to stay with you, and he himself left. All the monks were relieved. Oh, at last he himself has gone. The head monk, the senior head monk, he somehow was not happy. He was in search of the one inmate. He wanted to stay with all the inmates, with all their positive and negative sides. He used to, with love, he wants to deal with them. So he was in search of that who ran away. Others, monks tried to dissuade him, try to discourage. But he continued his search, and he found him and he brought him back. And when all other monks were complaining, why you brought him back? His reaction was wonderful. You don't understand. What he told is that you don't understand. His presence is essential. He is our patience practicing factor. If he is not there, how can you practice patience? He is the weight against which you have to work to grow in strength. So you take the responsibility. You don't just simply blame. That is an optimistic attitude. That I don't blame God that he has kept me in such a situation. I take it in a very positive way. And what happens? The last this another thing which we have discussed here is, in life, whenever the stress comes, we want to run away to the comfort zone. But those who are optimistic, they do just the opposite. Whenever the favorable circumstances come, they take them to be just the stress breakers. That life is going to have stress. As in our scripture, very nicely it has been told that a man sitting on the bank of on the shore of the ocean, on the sea beach, and he's waiting for what? Let the waves subside, let the waves stop. I will go and have a dip in the ocean. I will swim in the ocean. So he's a fool. The waves are never going to subside. If he has to swim in the ocean, in spite of the waves, he has to just go and plunge on the ocean. There is no other way. So all the moments of happiness are just the stress breakers. Life means waves after waves will come. If I have to just take a bath, I have to swim there, I have to plunge on it. So he never runs to the comfort zones. He has taken that God has kept me in this situation to grow in strength. So just by relating to that dimension, he can take care of the dukkha and the daurmanasya. Automatically, that the defeatist attitude is gone. He becomes resilient enough, she becomes resilient enough to deal with the challenges of life. And once he can do that, the dukkha and daurmanasya actually results in this, the weakness of the nerve from which the tremor of the body ensues, the Parkinson disease and everything. It has to do with that stress, which we ongoing stress in our life, the tremor of the body. You'll find in the scriptures, it's all mentioned, irregular breathing, all those things, as the cause is gone, they also are resolved. And you start enjoying a blissful existence. As Swamiji once is indicating, that when you find that your body, you're enjoying health, your mind is easily getting calm, and it is going to that high states of meditation, then only you know the joy of living in this physical body. So that's the thing. For the first time you experience, there is a terrible joy, there's a bliss in existence. And that comes out when all these obstacles goes off. And that again enables you to broaden your perspective and build your life on that broadened perspective. So that's what the Ishvara Pranidhana does. So that now you will find that all the impediments which has been spoken of in the 30th and the 31st Sutra can be resolved by Ishvara Pranidhana. So the 32nd Sutra will actually conclude this section. This we will study in the next class, this Tat Pratishedham Ekatattva Abhyasa. With this Sutra, Ishvara Pranidhana will be concluded. And then another section, which will start with the preliminary practice of cleansing the mind. How we can cleanse the mind by just changing our attitudes. We are not always getting a situation to meditate. We have to deal with the world. When we are in the world, how by changing our attitudes, we can cleanse our mind, even when we are dealing with our day-to-day activities. That will be wonderfully spoken of in the 33rd Sutra, this 32nd, 33rd Sutra, and the succeeding sutras we will take up gradually in the next class. With this, we stop our discussion today.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Namaskar. Namaskar.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Namaskar.